The first question I would like to put to John is, there has been a lot of attention on the Trojan Horse hoax. And, your book and Therese O'Toole's book is fantastic on this, and I recommend everybody to read it. If you could just break down for us concisely, John, what was the Trojan Horse Affair and how was it pivotal to the development of Prevent in this country?
Well, essentially, I think the Trojan Horse Affair was an attack upon Muslim majority schools. I would add a slight note to say, most people will think that Muslim-led Muslim majority schools, but the school at the heart of it was led, in the sense of its head teacher, by a white feminist atheist woman who worked with the ringleader of the Trojan Horse plot, Tahir Alam. These were two people absolutely committed to school improvement and improving the opportunities of children. The school was so successful that it came from one of the poorest parts of Birmingham, with really what usually called really serious parameters in terms of unlikely school success. It shifted from around about 4% getting A to C in GCSEs to 74%, 74, 76% getting A to C in GCSEs. It was one in the top 14% of all schools in England. Now let's just pause for a moment to think what that success is. One of the things that the government had trumpeted all along was that schools make a difference. Inequality wasn't the main thing, that the school could transcend and overcome inequality. Here was a school that did that, and did it more effectively than other schools. And one of the consequences is that it was asked to take over other schools. So when people talk about the Trojan Horse plot, and no journalist asks this question, how can you take over another school? I mean, I might like to take over a school. How would I do it? Well, I'd have to have an incredibly successful school first. I'd have to be engaged with the Department for Education. I'd have to have their school improvement officers and officials discussing with me, and have them, and they would be suggesting the schools I should be taking over. And unsurprisingly, the schools that Parkview Academy was asked to take over were failing schools with a high proportion of Muslim pupils. So you're now moving into a situation where a Muslim majority school is moving to become a Muslim majority trust. And potentially you're getting a lot of enthusiastic teachers. You're developing a cadre of Muslim professionals keen to give back to their communities. So that was the situation that Parkview was in when the situation hit. And I would say, I mean, I'm now going to introduce another think tank. It has strong connections with Henry Jackson Society, so that's fine. And that's Policy Exchange. Policy Exchange had two major issues. One issue was security, and particular security associated with Muslims and clash of civilizations stuff. Its second major policy area was the academies program. It was behind that policy and the expansion of it. So what you had was two wings of the policy exchange strategy of taking control from local authorities by creating academy schools, empowering communities, and then discovering not only had they empowered the Muslim community, but that Muslim community had become powerful. And so that, I think, is behind the Trojan Horse Affair. A lot of lurid allegations. I've followed them all through the different twists and turns it took. So everybody knows it was a plot to Islamicize schools. Nobody was ever accused of plotting. everybody knows that the Clark report discovered extremism. There was no extremism. No charges of extremism were brought against teachers. When teachers were brought to misconduct panels, the charge against them was undue religious influence. So what is the due religious influence? Schools in England are not secular. Even if your school is not a faith school, it's required to have religious education and compulsory worship. They must have done something when they became a trust or when they became an academy, because academies were freed from the restrictions of having, they could determine their own curriculum. Parkview carried on with the curriculum that was the agreed curriculum for religious education, its agreed proposals for how it dealt with collective worship through Islamic collective worship. Absolutely nothing changed. The only thing that changed was the government's attitude towards it, and it became, in a sense, the mechanism by which it became the justification for the big expansion of the prevent strategy. And because it's the justification for the big expansion of the prevent strategy, we cannot now be allowed to go back and consider that a terrible injustice was done to governors, to teachers, to children, and to a community. Because what I always say, that Alan Rock, and if you look at, and you read newspapers, if you see the two words Alan Rock, you know there's going to be a very terrible story about prejudice, theocracy, conservatism, and so on. Yet Alan Rock was one of the poorest communities in Britain, and it produced one of the best schools. And I say it produced the best school because no school is successful except that it integrates the parents, the community, and the children within the achievement of the school. The results at the school fell back sharply, back to average, from being well above average. And that's described as a success. As Michael Wilshaw said, the children at that school are now protected from dangerous, self-segregated values. And what was the first act that the government did in the new form of the school was introduce its cadets program. Imagine this is a school where there's a danger of radicalization. So the government decided it's a good idea to give them military training. Some of these, children could really help if they were better trained in the area. So it was an absurdity. And Michael Wilshaw said, well, the thing with the army in the school and cadets, it's another route of social mobility for low achieving children. There were no low achieving children. They were produced as a consequence of the Trojan horse attack upon the school.
Yes, and as you've said, Parkview Academy in the top 14% of schools in the country, it was almost punished for its success. But how was that case pivotal to the next stage of prevent?
Well, there's an election, so I don't really want to be quoted on this, but one has to assume that the Liberal Democrats did moderate some of the authoritarian tendencies of the government. But when they had a majority, it brought in policies that it had intended to bring in or had flagged up in 2011. So I think that the government was waiting for an opportunity to indicate the need for something, which it then justified through that, Trojan Horse. So it's because of Trojan Horse Affair that the Academies programme, which was dispensing with a national curriculum, has introduced a new national curriculum, Fundamental British Values, based upon the security interests of the state. It's within the legislation that says schools must cater for the spiritual and moral development of the child, that spiritual and moral development of the child is now subordinated to a security agenda. But it also is the only example given in the 2015 Prevent strategy, which introduces the prevent duty on all public authorities, schools, health services, youth services, etc. It is the only example of the dangers of Islamist entryism into institutions. So the Trojan horse is there, central to the justification of the prevent strategy. And when you properly open up the Trojan horse, what you find inside it is dedicated professionals, people committed to their community, who delivered incredible opportunities for children. You'll see that they get described as misogynistic, hostile to women. That's why it's important always to remember it was a female head teacher that was delivering this on the ground. But they delivered among the best results in the country for Muslim girls who outperformed boys in the school.